we're lucky to have him. We're very grateful to him for, first of all, and in a sense last, for painting all the paintings that surround us. I don't think we'll be going to be able to move through the exhibition, I'm afraid, as we sometimes can do with floor talks, but Tos has agreed to talk to us from one point, and at times maybe you'll have to turn around and get an idea of some of the paintings he's talking about. The show is on here for another 6 weeks, so you've got plenty of time to look in more detail. Tos, thank you very much for coming. We're really looking forward to your talk.
The light makes me a bit speechless, but I'll get used to it. I stood beside this picture and that one because I was in Greymouth looking out of my window at this landscape. And I had gone to Greymouth in 1950 to be a Rory salesman because the labouring work I had to do in Nelson was getting too tough for me and didn't leave enough energy for painting. I remember my kids, this tower here, I always painted about that size. I painted one picture of it in relation to its surroundings, and one day they saw a photo of it, and of course in the photo the tower was about the size of a little pin there, and they said of the photo that the tower was the wrong size, and I was very delighted that they thought I painted the tower the right size and the photo painted the wrong size. I have a great quarrel with photography, except when in some cases it's used very beautifully as an art form. I saw some photos there of my grandson in Christchurch, and he's making the most beautiful things, and I recognised a fellow artist in him out of collections of photographs of people. When I went to Greymouth, I had an introduction to a family. I stayed with them, who related to some people I knew in Makua, Nelson, and it turned out that my host was the president of the Westland Art Society. So I was roped into the Art Society right away, and he and another fellow called Alan Holcroft were very relieved to get some ideas from me, because there was a Mrs. Kelly there who bossed the Art Society, and whom they complained about bitterly because when their paintings were in and the photographer came, she made a point of standing in front of their paintings. This is what went on in the Art Society at Greymouth. That group, we used to go out painting together, and they used me as a tutor, a new point of view. And this Mrs. Kelly, the same woman, accosted me in the exhibition one night and said, "What have you done to our Art Society?" I said, "Nothing, why?" And she said, "Yes, you have. Your influence is all over the walls." And my son Paul, when he was 12 one day, said to me, with a twinkle, "Daddy, why don't you draw properly? Why do you only scribble? Why don't you draw properly like Mrs. Kelly?" I don't know whether I can slap or what I did to it. There was a Catholic convent in Greymouth, and the ladies, a number of my customers were Catholic ladies, and they used to say to me, "Have you called on the convent yet with your Rawley goods?" And I said, "No, I haven't called on the convent." I was probably a Protestant brought up and a bit scared of the spooks around Catholic places. And they said to me the next day, "Have you been to the convent yet?" And I said, "No." "Oh, you should go." They said, "The nuns, they don't have a lot of pocket money, but they have some. And they like to buy all these presents for presents, gifts to mothers when they're visiting." I went round the third time and said, "Have you been to the convent yet?" And I said, "No, not yet." "Oh, you must go to the convent." So eventually I wheeled my bike along and leaned it against the green corrugated iron fence at the back and opened the gate and saw in front of me a door at the end of a gable, reaching within 12 feet or so of the fence. There was another gable like it, but further back, and then a third further back still. I went to the nearest one and pressed the bell, and I waited and waited and waited such a long time that I began to say to myself, all right, I'll go away and I'll tell the women that I called on the convent and nobody answered the door. Just turned to step away when I heard footsteps inside, and a young nun opened the door and said sweetly, "How do you do?" So compelling that I said back to her, "How do you do?" And then explained that I was the local Rawleys man and I had come to see if they wanted any Rawleys goods. Here was a card with a list printed of all the goods I carried with me. And she took the list away to find out if anybody wanted any of the things printed on it, and she was away again so long that I again thought of leaving and saying, well, I had called, but I hadn't sold it. Just when I made up my mind to go, she came back, and the list marked with so many things that I didn't have that many on my bike. A wonderful order. I totaled it up and came to £3.12 6. So much, much more than I ever got an individual sale before. And I said, well, I'd carefully chosen the time too when I should call on the convent. I didn't want to interrupt them at nones or nines or sisters or any of these things they indulge in that are so difficult to intrude upon and would make me feel so embarrassed. So I said to her, well, I haven't got as much with me on my bike as this order wants. I will have to come again and bring them. Would this time be a suitable time if I came tomorrow? Yes, this is a perfect time. So I came to House 1 again tomorrow. And, oh, by the way, she had said to me, oh, you've come to the wrong door. So I said, oh, I'm sorry, which door should I have gone to? And she held onto the door post and leaned out and said, that one there. I wasn't going to be parted from another convent. Not by an inch. So the second day I brought all the goods and I came and knocked at the right door, and again waited so long that I thought I would go away and forget it all. Then somebody came, and another nun came, and she had a black working apron on, and I was waiting for her to hold out her apron so I could pour all the goods in. And she didn't. We both stood there like goofs. And then I said, now where shall I put them? And she backed in and said, oh, I suppose you could put them here, and pointed to the boards alongside the tall runner. So I put down half a dozen bottles of ready beef, 4 bottles of baby talc, 3 packs of vegetable oil, soap, and we both got the needles. Then I stood up and back to the door and stood and waited, and she looked at me for a long time, and then she said, oh, I suppose you'd like to be paid. And I said, yes, it would be rather nice. So she said, I'll go and find the Reverend Mother. So again I waited, much longer this time than I waited before. And thought, oh, I'll go in, lose my goods and forget about it and tell the women I didn't do much good at convent. And just when I was deciding again, she came back and she said, I can't find the Reverend Mother anywhere. I think she must have gone to the bank. So there was money about somewhere, so I agreed to come the next day, at the same time, it's right door, a different young nun opened it, a rather charming looking girl with a red strand of hair escaped from her, what do you call that white band around their heads? Yes, something like that. And she said, how do you do? They evidently had the how do you do drill in the morning, so speaking to like good visitors. And I said, how do you do back? And said, oh, well, I've come about being a Rawley man and having sold you some goods. This is getting very difficult. Every time I come here, I've been here 3 times now, and I've met a different person every time. And I have to explain my business from the bottom up each time. And she said, oh, you could come here 27 times and meet a different person every time. So she took me inside and through long corridors there, and right angles, and there, and she deposited me in a little parlour at the front of the building, with a lawn down to, sloping down to Tainui Street, the main street. And she definitely closed the door. And I waited and waited and waited and waited and waited. And I was contemplating leaving and forgetting it all, losing the money, when I heard a loud whisper outside. What did you say? Speak up! I can't hear you! How much does he want? £3, 12 and 6. And I felt so guilty. Taking these poor She'd never been out of the house getting big money from everywhere. The Reverend Mother hadn't come up with the money, obviously. And I said, thank you very much, and she said, thank you very much, and I wrote out a receipt, and I went away. And I called on them, and they just round, and they didn't want anything, and I called on them the round after that, and they didn't want anything. And the third round, they didn't want anything. So I thought, oh, well, I won't call on them anymore. Now that the women are satisfied, I've called on the convent. I will let them ring up off the phone numbers on the card. Well, one day the phone rang, this is the Convent of Mercy, and I said, well, just a minute till I get my pencil and paper with you and I'll take your order. Oh no, do you give art lessons? And I said, well, no, I'm sorry, I don't. I admit that I do weekend school sometimes for the university extension, but I wouldn't feel I could ask private people as much as they pay me, and I couldn't afford to do it for less. You see, I have to make my living at something else, and I really haven't got any time for my own painting if I give out lessons in the spare time I have on the weekend. Now, I'm sorry I don't give out lessons. Oh, she was so disappointed. She was Sister Mary Clare. She was so grieved. She had so hoped, desperately hoped I'd give her art lessons. And I said I was sorry over and over again, and she said how grieved she was over and over again. Then I said, I thought to myself inside, I wonder if I am being mean this time. I wonder if this is some poor soul with a real taste and need for art incarcerated in this convent where the nuns usually make little pictures from Christmas cards to send their friends at Christmas time. Perhaps I should be, there should be some mercy coming from my side. They're the convent of mercy. So I said, well, perhaps I could manage an hour and a half on Friday afternoons. It's not much use my canvassing then, so many people are out shopping. Oh, that would be wonderful, Mr. Wilson. That would be wonderful. So I went down to Friday afternoon and I said, now, this is going to be tough. It won't be anything about copying pretty little scenes of postcards to make Christmas cards for your friends at Christmas. You understand that? Yes, Mr. Wilson. Yes, Mr. Wilson. It will be about volume, cubes, planes, movements in recession, about making space without destroying the essential, the physical two-dimensionality of the picture plane. Yes, Mr. Woollaston. Yes, Mr. Woollaston. Obedience is the hardest thing you have to do. Obedience, she told me in a later conversation, obedience was the most difficult. They had to vow obedience. It was the most difficult thing they had to keep their vow in, because they had to follow an order even when they knew it was wrong. She had great trouble with obedience, but with me she promised total, absolute obedience. Well, we set up a still life. And I said, make drawing of that now, I'll talk about it from the point of view I told you about the construction of volume. And she went ahead and said, oh, Mr. Woollaston, you draw it for me. And I put my pencil to the paper and she said, look at that line, you're a born artist. And we went on like that, from bad to worse. And in the end, I reproved her, and she said, oh, you and your dry old cubes. She was only willing to be obedient within the context of the Catholic convent and its vows. When it came to obeying an artist whom she had told all these lies to get lessons from, obedience was out the window. A very localized obedience. Anyway, we gave up. Oh, what happened too, I forgot this bit. She said, what are your fees? I said, look, I won't charge any fees. I don't want to set a precedent, and I just want to avoid giving lessons in a general way. No, we're independent of the convent, no fees, no lessons. I said, right, no lessons, and she agreed again. And she hit on a brilliant idea. She said, have you got any children who'd like to learn music? And I said, oh, my daughter, yes, she'd like. Oh, well, Sister so-and-so is a very famous, good music teacher. So we swapped the terms. For Anna, returned art lessons for Sister Mary Clare, and I was caught in the trap. And then she reproved, she tried to attack me one day. She said, Miss Webster, that was the librarian from whom she got my name. She was a Catholic girl. Miss Webster told me you'd be frightened to go to a convent. Frightened to go to a convent? What nonsense! Why, this is our home. You know, I go into all sorts of homes. I even go into Presbyterian homes. How silly of me, how stupid to think of being frightened to go to a convent. And I said, oh no, I gave up my fear of going to a convent. I came here with my raw goods to sell them. And I told her the story about meeting the third day a different nun and this girl saying to me, oh, you could come here 27 times and meet a different person every time. Well, she looked very thoughtful and puzzled. She kind of looked up to see and she said, did she say 27? And I said, yes, that's what she said. And she said, oh, yes, there's an old one upstairs always in bed. What do you want to hear next? I've blown myself out, I'm sorry. I would like it if somebody really wants to know something that I could answer. If you speak up and say a question.
This one up there.
Yeah?
What did you say to the person wondering about the volumes of space?
Oh, I can't remember, but I'll try and make something up for you. I talked about the thing that had happened to me in 1934 when I heard of a woman called Flora Scales who'd come to live in Nelson. And I knew I wanted to talk to her if I could get the chance because I had seen her paintings done in Paris at her sister's place at Mrs. Reeves in Christchurch when I mowed lawns there. And Mrs. Reeves kindly informed me, wrote a letter and said her sister was now living in Mrs. Rutherford in Tahuna, and I went to see her and said, please will you give me a term's lessons at a fair rate of payment? No, she wouldn't commit herself to anything like that, but she allowed me eventually 4 conversations. And it was all about making volume without destroying the physical two-dimensionality of the picture plane. Can you grasp that? Do it with. It was all about not imitating the appearance of space in what we choose to call nature, copying the way a photograph does it, making things look little because they're far away and making roads look narrower at the far end, which is not true. I mentioned the other night at the opening that I had sought on for this a pair of words, appearancism and realism. And they are opposed to each other. If you think for a moment about Chinese art, you won't say it's a bad art, it's extremely good art. If you think about Indian art, Persian art, any art except European post-Renaissance art, you will find that they never made a building or a street look narrower further away, which it is not really, it only appears to be. Chinese art never has buildings narrow at one end and big at the near end, because they're not really that way. The Chinese art draws them as they really are. The Chinese are realists. The post-Renaissance European academicians were appearancists. And I know what you feel like about it, but I don't like appearances. The camera takes a photo of a landscape I want to paint. I got some friends of mine in Taranaki at Christmas time to do me a photograph of Bailey's Hill because the weather was so bad I couldn't draw it much. And the photograph astounded me. I've looked at Bailey's Hill for 40 years, drawn it dozens, if not hundreds of times. And their photograph made the top go mean and tight and try to get out of sight of me. And I wanted to get out of sight of me. I could give it glorious fullness. photographs tell me lies that I hate. And vanishing perspective in drawing is a sort of thing that makes artists think it's pretty good to be pretty like a photograph, which is nothing to do with me. The means of making space when you are not going to have any vanishing perspective or any paler colours because it's further away and all that nonsense is movement. A simple little recipe like saying they had was a point moves and becomes a line. A line moves and becomes a plane. A plane moves and becomes a volume. And they've got to do it somewhere diagonally in order for you to demonstrate that so it can be seen, haven't they? You could have the first one going horizontal, but you need the plane to go that way or that way, I think. The line to go that way or that way to make it plane, otherwise you're only making a repeated square like the outside of the picture, inside the picture, and that doesn't get you any space. The study of Cezanne's work is very interesting. His verticals are never absolutely vertical. His horizontals are never absolutely horizontal. If he's doing a still life and there's an object on a table and you see the line of something on the wall going there, 10 times to 1 it comes out at a different level from it disappeared in. Now, people used to say he couldn't draw. I remember an old teacher I had called Scott in Nelson, and I showed him after I went to Dunedin in 1932 and found they had prints of Cezanne. I showed him one, and he was furious with me and told me I had to take no notice of it because he couldn't draw. So after that, he and I could never discuss art again. We would stay friends and talk about everything else but art. And this is, it's like religion. If you belong to a denomination, you can't talk to people in another one. And the denomination I belong to, men I couldn't talk to you, Scott anymore. Yeah?
Would you say then that your attitude towards colour and light
Colour and light.
is the same as your attitude towards
Yeah, the thing about colour is to contrast one colour with another so that they both look the better for the contrast. I've got a game I like playing. I use very dull, earthy colours. I like to contrast them so that they look brighter than they would be if you saw them, say, on a white ground, each separate. Cezanne has an aphorism: to paint is to contrast.
I noticed your colours are quite earthy and almost muddy.
They used to, John Summers in Christchurch coined the phrase in the 1940s about my work, "ma poor mud." Yeah?
Were there any other early New Zealand women painters apart from scales who influenced your work?
Early New Zealand women painters who influenced me, apart from Flora Scales, I think influenced early New Zealand women painters. Frances Hodgkins I admired very much. She may have influenced me because I admired her, and I couldn't measure or describe the exact degree or kind of influence. Now, and this idea of women painters and men painters, the sexes in painting, doesn't bother me at all. Painters are painters, whether they happen to be men or women, doesn't seem to signify to me. If painters are good enough, and they're women, that's okay. I don't rush around saying women painters because I've seen a good woman painter, do I? All this women painters business goes over my head, I'm afraid. Who's going to stimulate me next time?
The murkiness of your paintings, is that not surprising for the New Zealand cat?
Well, it's not surprising to me because I'm so used to it, I've done it for 40 years. It might be surprising to somebody who hasn't seen my
The
painting
light is
before,
so very sharp.
and who has the idea that New Zealand landscape ought to be painted in garish bright colours or something. No? Murkiness.
That's murky, isn't it? I mean, it's murky.
What?
Sure. Of course it is murky.
I like to make the other colours glow if I can. And there's a famous quotation of something I said years ago. It says, I wrote it in a letter to somebody, it got out. I want to paint the sunlight, but after it has been absorbed into the earth.
Right. No, I wonder because Cocteau, when he worked in France, worked and he was very different.
I couldn't work in other parts without feeling very strange and awkward for a long time. And I would have to have a curious thought implanted in my mind and be unable to resist it to make me change my habits to painting what I now call garish colours. To live with them long enough to find out it had them so they were garish would be another lifetime.
Tos, to what extent do you think you're fortunate in being in Nelson, the West Coast, in terms of what you wanted to paint? I'm asking if you've been unfortunate enough to live in Auckland, for example, what difference would that make, do you think?
I don't know. I've just started coming to Auckland in the last few years and I enjoy painting its landscape. I went to Nelson to escape my failure in Taranaki. I had failed to pass matriculation. I had to leave high school after 3 years. I had to go and get a job because I had 4 younger brothers. My parents weren't rich and they were needing their turns at high school. And I went to work on a farm somewhere and the farmer's wife was raving about what a lovely time she'd had with the girls picking apples in Nelson. So off I went to Nelson and found there, what I found was I could indulge in a lifestyle that allowed me to have time for painting. I could work hard day in and day out during the fruit season and then milk somebody's cows night and morning for my keep and lodging and have all the time rest to see them paint. I took care not to succeed at anything else. I was very glad I didn't pass matriculation and get involved in going to university. They wanted me to be a school teacher. There was an exam called, I've gone off for a subject, haven't I? There was an exam called Teacher's D you had to sit and it was decided by the teachers and my parents that a school teacher was what I was going to be. Well, I particularly didn't want to be a school teacher because I'd been taught by so many of the buggers. And I didn't like many of them. So I wasn't going to get myself involved in doing that. So when this Teacher's D exam sat, I was afraid I might pass it. So when a form came round for us to fill in and it said, do you agree if you pass the examination to go to Teachers College in Auckland or somewhere? But no! But I was lucky about that, I didn't pass.
What made you become a painter?
Something outside the range of my memory, because I don't have much memory before I was 5 years old. But Mother used to, on wet days, sit with me and we would both paint in watercolours copies of little, like the nuns, little pretty scenes on English rivers with swans swimming along. And I said I was going to be an artist. And she said, no, don't be an artist, artists always starve. And when neighbours came, visitors came, and they always patted little boys on the head and said, what are you going to be when you grow up? And I would say, an artist, and they'd recoil and say, that's a funny thing to want to be. There were only two popular answers, a farmer or an engine driver. I wasn't interested in either.
Your main concern has been with the landscape in your painting. Your main concern has been dealing with the landscape in your painting. Could you just expand on why you chose landscape?
I didn't choose landscape. I'm a portrait painter, I'm a figure painter. I looked through my old drawings lately and noticed that more figure studies and portraits are there than landscapes numerically. It's just that the landscapes idea and the people, it's been said over and over again, I'm a landscape painter. I have had actually 5 portrait commissions, family groups and singles. There's a picture here of Peter McLeavy's parents, which is a And there's the, I think there's a Buchan family here, which is portrait commission. But the kind of people that, you know, want to buy a portrait that flatters them, I would never get a job painting a portrait of the mayor or anything like that. The only people who commission me are those who like my painting. Now, I am a landscape painter, but I am also equally a portrait painter and figure painter. But in exhibitions and in writings about me, it's always the landscapes that get the treatment and not the figure painting. And I'm waiting for somebody to say, good Lord, he's a figure painter after all.
I must say, I actually relate to your figure paintings more than I do to your landscapes. And secondly, I love your interpretation of the Velasquez around the corner. It makes me want to, I think it's a marvelous understanding of Velasquez. And secondly, it makes me feel joyful, and also I love the frame.
I'm not responsible for the frame, but I am responsible for the discovery, usually hidden from us in prints, that the space in that ceiling is absolutely wonderful, and its relation to the back of the easel, two planes. Here, I have two planes in that kind of relation, one there, making a marvelous space. The photographs, the reproductions commonly like the bottom half where the human beings are, the people like them, just put a black blanket on top. I had a good long stare at the picture in the Prado in Madrid. And when I painted it, I created a picture on Velasquez the same way as you create a picture out of what you see in nature. Not by copying it, but by being excited about the rhythms, the hidden harmonies of the subject, and trying to dig them out and make them into your painting. The figure of Velasquez himself, if you look closely, you'll find the head goes the opposite way to Velasquez in the painting. And the model for that was a friend of mine called Maggie Grant. She happened to be staying with me and I was painting her a lot. And when I wanted to paint Velasquez, I didn't bother with the reproduction, I put Maggie there. So it's my painting. Courtesy of Velasquez. Thank you very much, Velasquez, for providing me with such a wonderful subject.
Did you have any special time when you had a definition of the real light and...
Would you return to this again? Sorry, yes,
did you have any special period where you concentrated on the real light, electric light, and then you sort of changed a little bit? I'm looking at that one picture over there.
the subject?
Yes, in the here.
Oh, this one?
Yes, where the clouds are made of light, but the paint is light. Did you sort of deliberately do that? You know, it's not light from the light in the sky, but the paint is light.
Well,
Did you sort of change from one light to
how can the light in a painting be anything other than painted light?
Well, in that one it seems to be that you use the lighter colours to make it light, not necessarily light itself.
They're white clouds touched with yellow.
Maybe that's just the way I see it.
I think they've got a floating quality like clouds. There's the bits of angles, not vertical in them.
Whereas the one down here, the one in Wellington, you can see that the light probably is really shining over the cliff. You know, to me,
The big one
yes.
with the white houses.
Yes.
Yes, I just put a lot of rough white for the houses sort of petering out as they go up the dark hills.
Oh, I see. I found it interesting.
Would you care to discuss one of your paintings in detail?
I'm not an art critic. I would have great difficulty.
Or
But,
just discussed in lack of detail?
Big one?
Discussed in lack of detail.
The lack of?
Just to discuss one of your paintings.
Yeah, I would if you would confront me with one. The Buchan, that's the Buchan family, the girls, yes. Do you know, I'm in the habit of looking at paintings rather than discussing them, and I just go quiet when I look at the painting, I'm sorry. Words and paintings have a very dangerous relationship. I saw this illustrated acutely in New York, where there was an exhibition of paintings, and every painting had a foolscap of typewriting by its left bottom corner. And every viewer went and spent 10 minutes reading the painting, the writing, swept his eyes over the painting, and then read the next painting's 10 minutes, words instead of looking. So I might be very cross with you for wanting to talk about if you could ask me specific questions, if you have any problems with that, but maybe I could try to answer. This is not getting to the rest of the audience, I'm afraid. You have no specific question?
So do you like viewer to interpret the paintings how they want?
Yeah, I don't like the way some people want to, but the way some people want to is all right. There's a great variety of interpretation. Well, the point I'm making here is that a painting, if it's any good, will not go into words. A painting is not an illustration of a verbal idea. Paintings have to be looked at much more importantly than they're talked about. And that you should have me here to talk about my paintings is an anachronism. You should just be looking at them and not listening to any rubbish I talk. Yes?
Could you tell us a little bit about your development in the earlier years, your major frustrations, your major breakthroughs that you had in your development as a painter?
My very early beginnings, yes, actually. Well, there was my mother teaching me. We were enjoying doing watercolours of little tiny things when I was 5. That was doing the artist. Then I went to school, and I found painting exciting in the primers. In primers, the system at our school was you got a little dish with red liquid paint in it, and another one with yellow liquid paint. You got a piece of white paper, you made a circle with the yellow paint, then you dipped your brush in the red and you put the point of it almost touching the centre, laid the brush down, it was a soft sable brush, laid the brush down, didn't move it, pulled it off, and there was a red petal. You did it all around the flower, 8, 10 or dozen red petals, and that was exciting. Then we got into the standards where children are taught to be more responsible. And drawing consisted of making it look like it was really, or what stood for that in those days. And the 3 great principles were vanishing perspective with illustrated by the rail lines, getting both sides of the vase absolutely the same, and shading with your pencil so that you could not see an individual pencil mark. It had to be so smooth. The result was I got very bored with drawing in the standards. And in about standard 4, we came across a poem by a poet called Shelley, The Cloud, I bring fresh showers to the thirsting clouds and laid in their noonday dreams. I bear light shade of these. Sanguine sunrise with his meteor eyes leaps on the back of my sailing rack, all these wonderful heavenly images, and I fell for poetry and forgot all that drawing. Drawing was a dull, boring thing used to illustrate uninteresting things. And I decided the thing to be was a poet, and that lasted till I was 18 and had arrived in Nelson and went to church, and a nice lady called Mrs. Thomas invited me home to lunch or dinner, as she called it then. And on the walls were watercolours, real paintings. The first time in my life I've ever seen a painting that wasn't a reproduction. And she went into the kitchen to prepare lunch and put me in the sitting room with her husband, who was a gruffy Indian ex-officer with walrus moustache, and she said, "Have a red pen." I jumped out of the chair, went over and looked. I said, "Oh, what are these? What are these?" And he said, "Oh, my wife." I wasn't allowed to talk about them. So I did a very unmanly thing. I went in the kitchen with her after lunch to dry the dishes with her in order to talk about them. And I said, "What do you do when you buy? You go to Mr. Savage's in Nelson, and you buy brushes, it's called so-and-so, and you buy paints, and next right out to bust and did all that." Then I showed her something I'd done, and she said, you don't need enough water and it works too tight. So I began to get towards the freedom. And then I went to a chap called Hugh Scott in Nelson, and he taught me what he could teach me. Basically academic. He's the one who thought Cezanne was so wicked. And I lasted with him until he said, well, I can teach you no more. You should go to the Canterbury School of Art. It's the finest school in the land. So I got on the Newman's bus and went to the finest school in the land and stayed a couple of terms. And was so bored, I thought I really must have mistaken my vocation. Perhaps I'm not an artist after all. But then an exhibition came called the Group Show. There was a thing called the Group that exhibited annually in Christchurch for quite a lot of years, 40, 50 years, or 30, 40 years anyway. And in this painting I saw the work of a man called Robert Field, and, believe it or not, the paint was exciting. Now, excitement was a forbidden quality at the School of Art. You had to knuckle down and do a shaded drawing with no pencil lines showing that plaster cast. That was your first year's diet. The second year you could have two colours, white and burnt umber. I once put a bit of red on a stand the thing was on because somebody was putting ink on it and I got told off. Colour was not admitted until I think the third year. Then you went to the life room and drew the model, and I didn't stay 4 years, but I said to the principal, look, I'm not going to be able to afford to come back to school out anymore. Can I go and draw in the life room? And he looked very doubtful. He supposed he could let me, so I went in there. And he came in and made sure that I knew that he could see that I couldn't draw. So I left the school and I saw this painting in the group show and I said, I'm going to Dunedin next year to see what I want. And the students themselves who were involved in this hideous diploma racket, which is a 4-year course so that you were ground down into the right shape with no protuberances of any kind, so that you can do it to the next generation and you get your license to teach the poor devils and you keep the same system rolling in perpetuity. That's what it's all about, making a living doing this dastardly thing to people. And they actually said to me, the students who were involved in this diploma racket, oh, you shouldn't take any notice of that stuff, it's modern, it's irresponsible. So I got to Dunedin and found freedom, but I didn't know how to make any use of it. I'd been crippled for the time being, couldn't use freedom. And it wasn't until 1934 when this woman called Flora Scales gave me a technique of the intellect, not of the hand and the brush, but of the intellect, so I can think about making space in terms that did not interfere with the actual physical two-dimensionality of the picture plane. I got so permanently excited that I still am in that. That's the last bit of teaching I've had, and I don't want any more thank you. Okay?
Marcel, am I right in thinking that you and Colin
Sorry, two of us.
Am I right in thinking that you and Colin were good friends and have lots to do with
Colin came up, I met Colin, Rodney Kennedy introduced me to Colin in Dunedin when he was 70 years old. Then Colin came up to pick apples with the same orchard as me for a while, then not with me. And for a little while, he saw my exhibition in Dunedin, my first one-man show in 1936, and has since made remarks about how it moved him along. But very soon he became the painter he was and didn't want to go on being influenced by anybody, me or anybody else. And we sort of went our separate ways and saw each other occasionally, but we didn't have a bosom friendship. I remember him saying, my saying I was going to go into more colour, and I'm going to go into black and white, and all the colours sometimes got quite tiresome and we didn't bother to stay together much. And you had a...
Just one question. I noticed you made particular reference to watercolours, rather another expression. With your mother when you were young, and then subject matter, what do you do when you use oil?
Normally, watercolors are nice and easy to take out onto a view. I always start working in front of the subject. Occasionally I do an oil in front of the subject, a small one. But mostly I use watercolors for initial work. Then the watercolors as models, and I do oil paintings. Oil paintings you can do big in the studio so that you can never take them out onto the site. So watercolors are quick and soon over. All that happens now, and you can't talk it afterwards. Oils you can meditate about and look at for 2 months, then decide you want to change that and so on. They both serve their purposes. They're both my favourites. Yeah.
You haven't spoken anything about your wife, the part she played, you painted. Your wife.
My wife?
Yes.
Oh, my wife. She was my greatest support. She came away and lived with me in my one-room playbrick studio in Marlborough. She was a city engineer's daughter indeed, and used to a slightly upper lifestyle than that. And it was aim, wish, desire, hope was that I should paint. And she was more important to her that I should paint than I should even be recognised as a painter. And she would go through whatever had to be gone through with me and all of me. Now, the thing happened in Greymouth here. I said, look, you know, I think if I could manage to get up painting, we'd have an easier life. I could concentrate on earning money. And she simply cleared the big front room and said, there's your studio, get into it. That's a good answer. Yeah. And she was my model, particularly in Marlborough. When I came home from work and we had our meal washed up with the children to bed, I'd start drawing her and she'd always fall asleep in the chair because she was so tired. So a lot of the drawings in here, I think you might want to hear are asleep. A lot of relations. She was devoted to my painting and made her life as much as possible a means for me to paint.
Did she paint as well?
She painted at being, she never painted after, like Colin's wife gave up painting, said there was only room for one painter in one household. He didn't say that in words, but she just didn't paint anymore. I've got a lot of people painting of hers with a cat about that big. She did before we were married. Yeah.
Any comments to make on art critics?
Well, you have noticed my reluctance to become one. They all know it all, but they all have to be different. There are some good ones. I've read art criticism and I've really been thrilled by it, not very often. They are in a dangerous situation. Their work tends to reinforce the idea that paintings are interpretable in words, and they are not. So the fact that art critics exist is a bad thing for looking at painting. They write about painting, people read what they write, then think they don't have to look because they know already. That's the unfortunate effect of the art criticism, the industry it has become.
Probably like economists.
It's
probably like economists who've got all their own ideas, different ideas.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch what you said.
They're like economists.
Like economists?
Yes.
I don't know enough about economists to know what they are. I wouldn't be surprised if it turned out. Huh?
Have you been interested or influenced at all by Maori art?
Maori art? I haven't directly, but I do love it. If I see it earlier, I might. But I'll tell you a story, not about being influenced by art, but I lived for a while in 1938 in the Marlborough Sounds with my wife and first son Joe, with a Mrs. Grimsdale Anderson, who was a cousin of Catherine Mansfield. She was an elderly widow and needed somebody who didn't grow vegetables and so on. It didn't work out, but one day I brought in a watercolour I'd done, and she looked at it and said, if I hadn't known you had done that, I would have thought it was by a Maori. And I was mighty pleased, because I knew what it meant. It meant that I hadn't done the shading and gradation and perspective like the traditional academic English art she was familiar with. So I took it as a great compliment, and she meant it as exactly the opposite.
I thoroughly enjoyed reading Sage Tea. When is the rest of the autobiography coming out?
Well, I had dinner with a man last night in Cezanne who has ideas of getting it published perhaps within a year. I hope he manages. It has been written and turned down by publisher after publisher after publisher through an agent I had then who I haven't got now anymore. So I said to this man last night, will you be my agent, go ahead and give me carte blanche. He said, need a little bit of editing. And he was right down the offended if a single word was cut out. And it's long enough ago since I wrote it, I've forgotten it enough, and I won't be able to notice what he's cut out when I see it in print.
That's exactly the same thing I was going to say. Thank you for Sage Tea, and I was hoping to today. I just thought it was out. I thought your second part of your biography had been published.
Not published. No, the story of the 27th Nun out of it has been published in that magazine.
Yes, I know that.
I go blank when you...
Has anybody got a final question for Toss? No? All right. Well, look, Toss, thank you very much indeed. You've made a lot of points about the way that words can't actually substitute for paintings. We know that, but your words have enriched our viewing of your paintings greatly. In the Toss Wilson exhibition. As I said, this is the only one that Toss will give to us himself. Next week, the education curator at the gallery, Roger Taverner, will be talking in the panoramas room of this exhibition, and there are programs around to show you what's coming up in the Wednesday floor talk. So we look forward to seeing you back again and to enjoy the show.